Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am Matterall, here with our roundtable, starting with Elise Randolph.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Elise talks about all things, all things, but mostly history, nullsec, tournament, all that stuff. Super experienced player, been making decisions at a high level in this game for a long time. We're glad to have him. We also have Arcia here with us.
Good morning. Glad to be here. You
know Arcia as Baleful Dysnomia streamer, and she does Faction War, Eden Com, and role play, and a ton of other things. She's an FC as well. Super experienced. Hateless is here with us as well.
Hello, guys. Good to see you again.
Hateless is, again, I like to call him the Mozart of PvE, or somebody who does an amazing job of orchestrating multiple characters as he fights his way through NPCs and all kinds of other stuff. We'll be talking about the Nexus, the Winter Nexus, later in the program. Also off screen, we have Caleb. How's it going? One more time so they hear your voice.
Hey guys, I'm doing fine. Thank you very much.
There it is. Caleb's an old player going back to 2003. He was kind of someone that CCP consulted like a CSM member before it even existed. And he's also very much into the big game of sustainability and economics, trade, harvesting, and the sim overall. And so that's his expertise, among other things.
And later, he's rich, right?
Yeah, you're the brokest economist I know. For good reason. You actually are the honest one. Also later we'll have Tiberius join us, and he is someone who knows a lot about wormhole space, and there's some stuff going on there. He'll be on in a little bit. And our guest today will be a little bit later. We're going to talk to who, Arcia?
Mikal Vektor from Dirt and Glitter of the Alliance Localist Primary.
And we'll be talking about Faction War and what's going on there in the middle of the program. Okay, let's get started. The first thing that we need to cover is what's going on in nullsec, and the biggest part of nullsec right now, besides maybe some stuff that's going on in Tribute we'll get to another week, is this war in Delve, and it has heated up and cooled off and heated up again. What's going on, Elise?
So after the entire Pappy Titan fleet kind of got trapped in it, not kind of, absolutely got trapped in an attack, right? They tried to have the round 2 of the Titan fight, didn't go quite as they had hoped. I think we've kind of beat that one down as far as it can go. But suffice to say, Pappy are now solidly on the back foot. I think DBRB had claimed that the Imperium were losing up until that point, and now they are very solidly winning. I think there's no way you can look at it any other way. As a direct result of that, the Imperium have gone through Delve and had to systematically try to remove a lot of the inroads that Pappy had made, specifically when it comes to the iHub ownership. Pappy had, I think, taken 4 systems with Goon Keep Stars in it, and had worked up the iHub upgrade to iHub level 3 so they could put in jammers, which is like their strategic way of going to kill these Keep Stars, right? It's like put up the jammer, send their caps in, and then nothing like M2-XFE can happen again. But the Imperium went, and so they had like this thing called a Doom Clock on it. So I had like little timers when these things would hit soft 3. They've gone through Delve and taken 4 of those systems back. So they have completely reset the clock on that. If the Pappy side wants to do it, they'd have to take that iHub and crucially hold it for another 4 weeks or so to get those jammers back online. This has taken the fight of a lot of spread out fights. When you do Aegis Sov, the timers show up in the entire constellation. So there have been just these massive fights with like between different constellations. A lot of the cap fights or the subcaps are barely missing one another. Some of them are fighting. Some of them are just dodging and glancing by each other. But that's what the fighting has taken to this week. The Imperium have, I think, captured all but 2 of the systems back. In fact, they had a 100% record until this morning, where they kind of just barely lost in the one SPEB constellation. And I think the bill on that one was like 300 bill. It was like 140 to 160 Tappy to Imperium in terms of losses. So people were worried that the fighting would peter out and stop. Nope, just taking a different turn. The Imperium do have a huge swell of momentum going forward. They have more numbers, more everything, it seems, which is what you would expect. But Pappy still haven't rolled over. They haven't died. I know a lot of people were like pontificating this week, like, oh, is the war over? It's absolutely not over.
Seems like it's more
gonna be
even, right?
I mean, I don't know about even. I think the Imperium are like super winning now, but they're super winning.
Showing up.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. The Imperium are winning until Pappy responds, right? So it's going to be really crucial to see how they respond. The signs of life that we saw this week were really good. If you want to be like completely objective, Pappy aren't sitting and crying in a corner, licking their wounds. They are coming out. They are doing fights. They are occasionally outforming the Imperium, though it is, as you put it, much more even numbers wise. The Imperium are generally have a little bit more on some of these timers, and they're more willing to use capitals because they know that Pappy have been defanged in a sense. There've also been some hilarious things that have been happening. The Imperium, I think on the fireside chat, the Mittani went and did this really hilarious thing where he what did he call it? Like Mittani's golden ticket or something. I don't know, like a Willy Wonka's type thing.
Willy Wonka.
Where he announced that any alliance, there's only just one, but the one that bids the highest, he will let that alliance's super caps out of M2. And they can, like, all these alliances can bid on it. And the only one that can't is Tappy. So Tappy can't do that. They're excluded from this silent auction, but everyone else can. And it is genius, right? It is absolutely genius because no one from Pappy is going to do it. I think that's, if you want to argue that maybe they can, okay, whatever. But there's zero chance. It
would be comedy if somebody did. But
yeah. But here's the beautiful part, right? And this is why the Imperium have been surviving as long as they have. You don't even need it to succeed. You don't need anyone to take it. You know, at some point, somehow, some way, this hell camp in M2 is going to break and someone's going to escape. You now can just say, They purchased the ticket, guys. We let them out. That's what happened, right? Like, and you literally just put yourself in a no-lose situation. You find this win, and you can just figure out a way to have a no-lose situation for it. Because if the caps escape, guys, they bought the ticket. Now you'll never know for sure. That's the thing. You'll never know for sure that they didn't. So that could be like a little bit of discord that you can sew in there.
Yeah,
it's just beautiful.
That's like the cops saying, picking up a gang member and saying, "We've had you in the car for a half hour. You got to talk now because we let you out. We'll just say you told us anyway, and your friends will kill you."
Yeah, yeah. It is super. Like, credit to the Mittani or whoever came up with that plan. I would never even think of that that level of move. It is so memey and perfect and just quintessential goon as well. Like, I just love it. I think it's hilarious. The Imperium are having a lot of fun. With their huge victory, right? Like, if you're a member of Pappy, like you still can't go on Reddit for another probably week or so.
It's still not ready for you.
Yeah, the smug explosion is still going off. It's hitting all four corners of the globe, right?
Yeah,
but in terms of
isn't historically this war more about a hold my beer moment about who can actually fail the hardest?
I mean, that's the thing, right? So if you're the Imperium, you can gloat, you can boast, you can have a lot of this fun with the golden ticket, but you also have to stay composed because the worst thing you can do is just have a hubris feed where you let Pappy right back in the door, right? Like, if you lose a couple things, a few ships, a few big ships, a few big timers, then Pappy starts getting that momentum again, right? You've been given this huge gift, and not to say that you lucked into it or anything, but through your victory, if you're the Imperium, you have reset the entire Pappy momentum. Like that snowball that's gotten bigger and bigger, you threw it right back on top of the mountain, and it hasn't started to fall yet. So the worst thing you can do is just push it over and let it build again, right? So that's why you're not seeing more aggressive actions here. Like you're not seeing T5Z being reinforced, right? That would be disastrous. If the Imperium actually thought the war is over, you go for that kill shot right there. You reinforce T5Z, you know they've got no capitals that can defend it, and you just kill them and push them further out of Delve. Strategically, that's what you do. But again, that would be a disaster because Pappy are still quite strong and quite formidable. They haven't been like beaten down to the point of defeat yet. And this shows that the Imperium, at some level, right, they absolutely know this to be true, and they're doing everything they can to not let Pappy back in, right, and to not let that snowball keep building momentum and come for them.
Do you think that the situation that they're in now was caused by an overreach, by hubris on the side of Pappy when they went for 3 keep stars in one day after Christmas? And what do you think of that? Or even attacking 1DQ right away? Or what are they doing? Are they testing, or were they testing? Or do you think they're trying to break the Imperium, or we're trying to break the Imperium?
I think going for 1DQ when they did, and they didn't get anywhere close, right? I think they were just testing the water to see, because they had weakened the Imperium a bit, right? You lose Fountain, you lose Quirius, you lose whatever. You can say that the Imperium are fine, and the Imperium were fine, right? They proved to be fine, but their numbers did go down a bit, and the Pappy numbers in turn went up, right? So there is a disparity there. So they wanted to poke and prod just to see what they could do. Going for the 1DQ, I hope, was dumb, right? Like, and they immediately, you could see that the Pappy guys, they stayed in system for like an hour. They're like, okay, yeah, this was a mistake. And they left, right? And they didn't try that again. Going for the 3 keep stars, I don't know if that was hubris. I think that was strategically fine to do, because you get fights around them, and fights keep your members logging in. And to be fair, they got fights for all those timers.
Well, and they got members logging in too. Yeah.
Yeah. And after that first M2 fight, I think the first M2 fight caused a bit of hubris, right? And it's really exhausting to go through the M2 fight again, because every single person and their grandma has been like armchair FCing this 1,000 ways. Like, oh, this is where they lost. This is where they lost, when they couldn't get in the system, right? Like they lost when the Imperium got in the system first. Like it's FCing 101, right? Like the person who controls the grid has a huge advantage. The Pappy guys, they're just like, oh, they were willing to take a disadvantageous position, but they weren't sure exactly how disadvantageous it would be in terms of just not loading and just being a complete disaster. Yeah. But I think
just to tell people where we are, because we're a week after that. That was last Sunday. We did full coverage. That's why we didn't have a show. Or was it Saturday? Oh my God. All these days are blending together. Sorry. It was about a week ago. Go ahead, Elise.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that was the only hubris moment, right? And it wasn't even hubris. That was, maybe you could argue it was, but I think it was more excitement and wanting to get that rush of that M2 fight that they had the first time. They just wanted that again. They were just like, yeah, this is what we want. And crucially, for the first and probably only time in EVE, both sides wanted the same thing, and both sides thought they were winning that first M2 fight, to the point where both sides wanted to do it again. That has never, ever happened in EVE. And I don't think we'll ever see it again, where like that type of dynamic exists. It was so absolutely fascinating. And what got the Imperium there, I think they should get credit for what they did in the weeks before that, before the M2 fight, is they played it cool. They didn't go for big timers. They didn't go for big things. They just tried to maintain their member count. Well, I don't want to say boring out, but like letting the other side drop their numbers a bit, get a little bit bored, get a little bit exhausted from clearing uncontested timers.
Oh, interesting.
I know a lot of the Imperium narrative is, oh, we told you guys that this would happen on the first Keepstar timer, and this wasn't the first Keepstar timer. The Imperium lost Delve or lost Null without even showing up. They went next door and didn't really contest the timer too much. They contested the jammer, but they found this position where they had brought the Pappy numbers down to a little bit more than them, but not a lot, right? So it's not like 30% more than them. It's like 15% more than them. And they're like, okay, this is what we waited for. We wanted to get as close to an even match as we could. Let's go in and do it. And that's what they did. So M2, the first one, was a culmination of a few weeks worth of work, which is going to be easy to forget about, right? It's not just, hey, it's a Keepstar, let's throw our Titans on it type of battle. So I think the Imperium needs to get a lot of credit for that. And now Pappy has to do the same thing, but on the other side, right? They need to weather the Imperium's smug storm, and they have to wait for the numbers to get down a little bit without losing their numbers as well. So they have to motivate their members to keep logging in, while also not like playing into the Imperium's hand too hard. And they've been doing a good job, I think. Not perfect, but I'd give them a B on this, on what they've been doing so far. They're not out of the woods yet. They still probably have another 3 or 4 weeks where they have to do this, maybe a little bit more before they can go after big timers again, before they can try to make more inroads into Delve. There were, 4 or 5 iHub timers in this last week, and Pappy were able to save 1. Better than saving none, right? You still have good fights on this. That's something that you can rally your members behind. Now there's things that you can do again, objectives that you already took that you can take again. So there's just going to be like constant iHub skirmishes, which is something I think Pappy are probably a little bit better at than the Imperium in terms of fighting for iHubs. Maybe not better, but more experienced. I think they have a lot more experience fighting under Aegis Sov, especially the Legacy contingent, because they had like a year-long war against the Winter Coalition, where Aegis Sov was literally all they did, right? So I think that's a positive for them in a sense. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, like, I feel like right at the start of this conflict, everybody was saying that it's going to come down to who can keep their members motivated and enthusiastic better than the other side, because both sides are pretty set on like money and stockpiles and ships and the ability to restock their ships and assets. And it's going to come down to numbers and enthusiasm. And I feel like that's exactly what we're seeing, because the strategy of boring out isn't exactly a new strategy. I mean, hitting structures and like not showing up, and then repeatedly making people form, making people get uncontested timers, making people not have a great time is like classic EVE long-term warfare. And I think that going forward, that's still the case, right? Like, it's going to be about who can keep their numbers up, drop the other side's numbers.
So I'm going to be 100% honest. That's one of the reasons I dislike flying in nullsec. So when you go and form up in a fleet and you are excited for a fight and you go and you're like, oh, what? We're just sitting here doing nothing. It's not exciting. It's not fun. And sometimes you end up in a situation where it's a 4-hour thing. You spend 4 hours doing nothing. You do that over and over. You're not going to be so encouraged to show up next time. And that will definitely wear down on groups if they have to repetitively do that.
Yeah, that right there is the point, right? That's why the strategy works, is because people... It absolutely works.
But it doesn't seem to be working this time. I'm not seeing any lapse in participation numbers or drop or anything. Maybe there's a little bit of annoyance and boredoms with the current strategic goals, but I'm not seeing any actual morale hit on any side. On the contrary, it seems like the momentums are growing, and the numbers available are growing, at least for the Imperium. And I'm pretty sure I'm not seeing any massive drops on Pappy side either. So I don't see this as a attrition and boredom strategy working at all.
I just know that works on average Joes like me.
I will say, to Caleb's point, Pappy formed 6,700 people in their staging before the second M2. And Pappy staging right now on an average day is going to be around 1,000.
And
So-
we didn't crash, or the whole crash with the thing that got everyone stuck, right? Because of the kind of known lag issues with the service. There was not a lack of members on both sides. That was like massive numbers. I think
Yeah.
someone said, what, 12K or something if we had actually pushed all the way through.
Yeah, but that's because both sides had just come off of what they perceive to be a win, right? Leading up to that, right? The fight before that, it was much more even in terms of Imperium versus Pappy. The Imperium, I don't want to call it the boar strategy because that makes it seem like they weren't trying or something. But the Imperium strategy of not giving away a big loss or not giving away a big fight really got them to a much more even playing field, which they then took advantage of. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't just, oh, it's December, let's chill for a bit. That was definitely like part of their strategy, and it worked. It didn't drop Pappy numbers by half. It didn't drop a huge chunk off by any means, but it dropped enough that they were able to take an even fight. And I think that we did see that, right? Compare the Pappy numbers from FWST and YZ9 and those types of things, where they're feeling like they're winning a little bit more, and those numbers are higher than the numbers, like I guess the comparative numbers between the Imperium and Pappy are higher in those fights than they are in the first M2 fight.
I'm almost going to say that I see this as a war that is growing in interest. Maybe it could teeter out eventually, especially if there's another punch. But because it's been this back and forth, almost seesaw, win and lose for both sides, there's so much more drama, and people are actually engaged and interested in the war. And if it's handled well in how it's portrayed and the two sides' narratives, I think this is something that could last. And if it actually ends up being possible to spread out the skirmishes a bit, so there's always something going on, a constant war might actually be really good for EVE Online. It might actually show some direction of where we should maybe hope that CCP wants to develop it, because wars in EVE are interesting and dramatic, right? And I think the way that we've handled the narratives have been really entertaining and not that toxic. There was a bit of toxicity, but right now I think it's in a pretty healthy state where, yes, there's taunting and teasing, and of course there's a few rage quits and stuff like that, but it's not bad. It's actually in a good place. I like this war. I think it's more interesting than at least the last two wars.
Is that all it takes, Caleb, for your side to start winning?
No. This is not about winning. This is not about winning because there's no win condition really. They're locked in, but we're going to see something happen. And again, if Pappy starts escalating a little bit on the type of weight class that they bring to fights, I think this could actually go somewhere. And I just know that the Imperium are willing to burn at least more than half of their Titan and Super caches, because if it's an almost even exchange, again back to like in chess, if it's queen for queen, it's fine. It's actually good. It's healthy for the game. It's good for their position, and it might actually also be good for the opposition's position.
The armor timer definitely was queen for queen. We saw both sides reduce their Titans by quite a bit. They still have a ton. Second fight wasn't that. Was a queen for nothing. Was a queen and one side of the board fell off. But I agree with you. It'd be nice to see these guys go back and forth, equal sized, and just totally annihilate each other's stockpiles. I think that would be pretty cool.
And especially because of what Elise just said, like when they both feel like they're winning, which they did before this big kerfuffle in the massacre, right? They all felt like they weren't at least losing. So that motivates them to put more chips on the table, and I think we can keep doing this for a while if this goes back and forth.
Right. There's a couple of the things that happened. One was ProGod put out an update to the Alliance. Did you read that by chance, Elise?
I did not.
I read it.
I haven't quite gotten around to reading ProGod posts.
I don't know. It was internal. So anyway, I read it and it was essentially like, yeah, we're in a bad spot. We're stuck. PL have been in this position, and we were very frustrated in UALX when they were able to take out and extract their stuck super capitals, and they're teaching us how to do it, so we'll do it. There have been some mistakes, by the way. One guy got caught trying to extract, or he was checking his, no, he wasn't checking his capacitor. He thought he was on a Fortizar because in the game he thought that he had moved there because it looked like he did. But the game set him back to where he was previously, which was in a stuck position. So when he turned it on, he actually woke up not where he thought he was safe, but right in the middle of being stuck, and he was blown up. And that kind of thing is going to happen. So what people do in order to prevent that is always check your Titan status right before downtime. So that way, if anything goes wrong, they don't have time to kill you. So it gives you a free peek at where you're at, what your situation is. And that guy did not do that. So that's why he got taken out. There was one other thing. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, there is going to be, like, the supers that are in M2, which is a lot, right? There's a ton of them there. Not only from the second fight, but from the first. That's where the first most active dudes are. That's where you want them to get out. They're eventually going to get out at some point, which makes the whole golden ticket thing that much more powerful, right? Because you could just, that's why I love it, right? I'm gushing about it because I find it so, it's like the perfect taunt and the perfect thing.
That's the classic goons that I like. They're hilarious. Like it's not a meme so much. It's just a clever move, and they're full of those kinds of things historically, which is the part that's really admirable about Goons War.
And if you want to, like, read into it a little bit more, and this is why it's really good, and why you see, like, these similar memes on Reddit and stuff. But Fraternity are the alliance that are best poised to do a downtime breakout, just because it works best with their time zone. So you're kind of even hedging your bets a little bit more. If Fraternity are the first group to get out, then you get to say, oh, Fraternity took the golden ticket. They're on their way out, guys. And you can point to be like, hey, Test, you're fighting this war. You're not making any money, and Fraternity's up north. The guys you were just in a war with, they're making so much money. You're going to be next. Test is. It's just so perfect. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. All right. There was something else. I forgot what it was, but it's probably not that important, or we can come back to it later. But I wanted to hit the ProGod thing as far as status. Oh, there was an article that was written. I think this is not what I was thinking of, but this is an additional thing, and then we'll move to a different topic. But it was Vince Draken that was quoted in the article in Polygon, and he said something like, "Well, the server pretty much isn't up to what we can do, right? 10,000 people can't fight at the same time, so we'll do this the slow way." And that seems to be the way forward. I think ProGod was saying the same thing. It's like, all right, we're just going to take it a little slower because we can't rely on a head-to-head collision like this, like we wanted to have.
And that's something that you really like to see, right? So people are saying, oh, what's the win condition? Where does one side definitely lose? If you, as Pappy, say, we made the right call, we did everything perfectly, and the server is out to get us, CCP doesn't want us to have fun. If you take that route, which they did not take, but if you take that route, there's no coming back, you're done forever. That's my firm belief, right? If you blame the server and say the game is unfair and rigged against us, then I believe you just never come back from that, and you instantly die. So instead, the route they're taking is, we can't do these huge things with these huge numbers, but that doesn't mean we're giving up. That means we're going to do it a different way, a way that we know how to do, or maybe we don't even know how to do it, but we're going to figure it out because we're clever, and our resolve is untested, blah, blah, blah. You can, whatever you want to say. So it's a really good thing to hear, especially from someone like Vince, who is one of the, I think it's an FC who probably deserves more spotlight than he gets. There are maybe 5 people in the game who can say they've conquered every... Actually, I don't even think there are 5 anymore. I think there's 5 in the history of the game who can say that they've conquered every region. Vince is one of those people. And it's not that he's just been a line member in there. He's been the one that has been doing it, right? He's been the one coordinating it, FCing the fleets, leading the ops. So he's an all-star. It's easy to forget. You have like these huge names all around, and Vince kind of blends into the shadows a little bit. This guy's an absolute rock star in terms of FCing. He goes back all the way, like to the beginning date, the early days of Eve as well. So like it's nice to see that that's his tone, and like his numbers are not dropping down at least or at all, right? That like the NC dot numbers are just as high as they were before M2.
Yeah. Well, he's like a war chief. I called him, and actually, I think you made a joke of it too. I called him Blackbeard, and you're like, Blackbeard, what the hell? I remember that comment because I was like, oh, Elise caught that one. But I call him Blackbeard because he's a very old school pirate. You know, he even has the gruff voice. He's not negotiated with kind of guy. Like he's the captain of the ship, and he says something and it goes. Like, and it's kind of neat to see that. I think it's it feels very old school to have you know, that kind of a brawler FC, and he takes a lot of chances in his fleets too. So you don't just get into a fight. You get into fights you're not supposed to win, and somehow you guys end up like surviving or pulling it off. So
yeah, this isn't the first time that Vince has had his super cap fleet stuck somewhere, right? I've been in the trenches with him too. When I was like first starting the FC, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we essentially went for a headshot in VFK, and Vince was there. He was like, "This is dumb, but let's do it."
Oh.
I also thought this was dumb, and so I I got the reins taken away from me because I was a junior FC. But we had our entire super cap fleet stuck at VFK. This is the start of Metanigrad, right? The Horn of Gundor. This is the first time it was ever sounded, was for that fight. And we got off just fine. We actually killed 2 super caps on the way out. We just took like a 2-week hiatus. We're like, oh, YOLO, like let's do this. And we had a good laugh about it. BTAC-R, we had our super cap fights or super cap fleet stuck. UALX, we had our super cap fleet stuck. Like this is something that Vince has lots of experience with, which makes it sound like I'm shitting on him, but I'm absolutely not. I have more respect for Vince than probably anyone else. But yeah, so he's been here before. There's no cause for panic from his side, at least.
Yeah. All right. That's the war report. Thank you, Elise. That was a lot of information. Next, we're going to have a look at faction war. We're going to bring in Mikal Vektor, and we'll be back in 1 second, just after this commercial break. We're going to try that. Okay, I'm doing a commercial break. We don't normally do that, just so we can transition a little bit, because we're going to be clumsy anyway with... Okay, there he is. He's unmuted. How you doing, Mikal?
I'm doing well.
Joe, subs can still hear us.
Oh, subs can? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, subs. This is what you get for subbing. You get to hang out backstage with us.
Oh, that's good. Hey, Mikal. Thanks for coming on.
All right. So in order to do this transition, that's why I hit the commercial button. But Arcia, this you want to introduce this when we get started here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. We're going to start in 15 seconds. No one is seeing a commercial? That's kind of embarrassing.
No one's seeing a commercial. Fantastic. This is perfect.
Perfect. All right, go ahead.
This has gone about as well as my attempts at anchoring Astra houses in Ardar.
Okay, we're back. All right, Arcia, take us through some faction war with our guest, Mikal.
All right, so we have on today with us Mikal Vektor, who is the CEO of Dirt and Glitter from the Alliance Localist Primary. I believe you are a Wrecking Crew Protectorate, and you are one of the, I think, probably the largest alliance in Amarr faction warfare. You have built up quite a bit in recent months, and we look like we're going into a very hot time period in the war zone. So thank you for coming on, Mikal.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, I think you're right about the war zone definitely heating up. We've grown a little bit in size over the last couple months in organization. I think MinMill has done the same, and so our engagements in Ardar have been really fun. I'm looking forward to more of them. I hope to see another Astra House anchoring soon. if one
Yeah.
is not ready.
So the engagement he's talking about is Electus Matari, my alliance, has had 3 attempts at anchoring an Astra House in Ardar. Mikal and the Amar militia defeated us soundly the first 2 times, and our 3rd fight was interrupted by a natural disaster known as Snuffed Out. So that one was yesterday. Elise was there too on our side, so that was fun. It was looking to be a really good fight before Snuffed Out joined us, and you've been doing a lot of the AB sacrileges and Gilas. Do you want to talk about how you're finding which doctrines are good in the war zone?
Sure. So we didn't really steal the AB sac doctrine. That's more or less adopted from 2 Maidens, 1 Chalice. That's Gian Ball's old alliance. We have brought on some of their former members, and so they are really fond of that sac comp. The Gila comp is shamelessly stolen from Calcif. I think it's actually still called Calcif Gila in our doctrine list. It's the exact same fit from them. The Bassi fit's the same. And I used to fight Spartan in Black Rise with Vexor Navy issues versus his Gilas, and I fed just every single time. It's kind of a meme at this point. Whenever Spartan wants to give me a hard time, he teases me about Vexor Navy issues. So after being beaten just probably a dozen times by these ships, I decided that this is probably the doctrine to go with.
Yeah, they are very sturdy and do a lot of damage for their cost. So they are definitely something we've been looking at in Pyfa. So I am rather impressed by the Gilas. And I've seen long ago DNG use Gilas. I believe DNG and some other groups showed up for one of my Astra House fights when I was in the Amar militia, and we fought against City Say Jump. And Snuff interrupted that one too, and we killed 45 Billither caps in Arzad. Were you there for that one?
I don't recall. Maybe. It depends on how long ago it was. After a while.
I think that was February 2019.
I was probably there for that. I did take a break from Eve for a few months that may have intersected with my break.
So go ahead.
Healers come from mission running. They run them in against Garistas, and they get LP, or in Garista space, and they get LP. Right now they're at an all-time low. So right now they're really cheap and effective, but if you guys start running them and using them a lot, they're going to get expensive. They'll go back up. The source is limited of where they come from.
To a certain extent.
I just want to add that. Well, unless you guys are the ones making them.
No, but we're talking about a scale where the supply isn't really all that relevant compared to our demand. I mean, we're an alliance with like 120 actives or so, and thus far we haven't been fed the Gilas too much, but we'll see what EM has planned for us in the future. Maybe that'll change a little bit. Right now, Gilas were a little bit cheaper a while ago. They actually got down to about 200 mil ISK for the hull and the fit, which was amazing because I mean it's just you can do so much with so little, and the SP requirement's so low. But yeah, I don't. Eventually, if we start feeding them, we may look at other options. But for now, they're pretty good.
Recently, all the people that were running those missions did a massive dump, and that's why they're cheap. Just letting you. I'm giving you guys a warning. Like,
why'd they dump those, by the way? A little
panic.
off topic.
I don't know if you guys remember, but about a month or 2 ago, people were like, "Oh, they're going to nerf missions." So, I guess instead of holding on to it, they just had to dump. I have no idea.
They did nerf drones, and then they unnerfed them. So, do you think people didn't get the message they got unnerfed?
No, I don't think it was that. I just think that it was a panic dump on LP, and also the people that were running them were wanting to get out of the activity as well. So,
well, Elise agreed with me, by the way. Just kidding.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what did it too. I mean, it's hard to understand the machinations of the Eve market and what people do, but I will say, like, they're in Glitter using them in the war zone, which by the way is like the Amar Minmatar Lowsec area. For those that aren't really too sure what we're talking about, this is like super cool Lowsec stuff. But their scale that they're using, I don't think it's going to like shock the price too hard, even if they all whelp. Luckily, it looks like as long as like the nullsec blocks don't come up with like great use for Gilas for some reason, which I doubt they will. We've seen Ishtars. Asher does love his Ishtars, but
You see a lot of Gilas just ratting along with Ishtars, but that's not really relevant towards what we're talking about once again. Anyway, to bring the conversation back onto Rails.
Sorry, I just want to add that.
I want to talk about one of the quintessential problems to running a faction warfare group, and I want to ask Mikal about his thoughts on getting around it. So one of the big things that happens in faction warfare is the war zone works in cycles, and for some periods of time it's relatively quiet, and then it heats up, and it flips between the two sides, mostly based on farmers who push the tiers. But the actual fighting, it heats up, and then there's a lot of big fights, and then it slows down again. And a lot of people who were newer, who went to low sec to start PvPing, find that they enjoy those big fights. And then the options normally become either wait for the war zone to cycle again, or leave and join a big pirate group, or leave and join nullsec. And it's hard to keep people long-term in faction warfare. How do you find that you get around that kind of problem, Mikal?
So Control V used to take what we called a testcation. When the war zone became stagnant, we would deploy to and join Test Alliance for a period. The last time we did that was in I don't know if you want to call it World War B1 or the Casino War or whatever, but it was in that period. And so we took a testcation, and then we found similarly no content. So that was kind of frustrating. This was back when goons were in Saren, and there just wasn't really much to be done anyway. As far as the problem of this, pendulum swinging back and forth and there being periods of stagnation and people look for other content, I don't really know, to be frank. I do agree that it's kind of habit for a lot of people to gravitate towards pirate groups when this happens. I personally don't really think that there's necessarily that big of a lull, though, when your faction is doing really well or when it's losing. The nature of the content just changes, because when you're losing and the other faction is oplexing systems and shooting iHubs, once the system becomes vulnerable, it creates an opportunity for you to play defense, where you can bring out like a kitey comp, for example, like our Osprey Navy issues that just shoot it out to like 100 kms. They're like cheap Serbs. But when you're on the offensive, you have to form a comp with Logi or risk being forced off the iHub. I think regardless of whether your alliance, your factions taking the war zone or losing it, there's opportunity for content. I think it kind of, to a certain extent, falls to us to help create that and help make the war zone a more interesting place. I'm sure others that are smarter than me that have thought about this for longer would have some interesting suggestions about how we might alter game mechanics to make that better. I frankly don't think that I'm one of those people, so I'm not going to speculate too much on it.
Wow. That's humility we don't usually see among EVE players.
Yeah,
I think that's something we should also maybe try to change.
Yeah, right?
That'd probably be for the best, right? So I find that even though faction warfare is hypothetically one of the best places to make money with the mission running in the LP, a lot of faction warfare participants end up relatively broke because all we want to do is fight one another. Do you find that your people have any trouble balancing the crabbing with the fighting all the time?
Absolutely. So I can tell you, these as an example, these events that just ended, the winter events, I spent a good bit of that time quad boxing Gilas, doing the events. You could probably get about.
I know, we tried to block you.
I know you. I think I did lose one of them eventually. To some mean wormhole ganking men, but yeah. So as an example, I spent some time doing that just because the ISK was so good, and I would hang out on TeamSpeak, and people would come into the channel and be like, "McCall, what are you doing?" And it got to a point where people would see the accounts login in my alliance, and they would just start shaming me in local, like, McCall, this is disgusting. This is what you're doing with your life. It is challenging because it's like you said, a lot of these people are here to try to blow up other people's spaceships, and when you do that, some of these people some of my members really loathe PVE. I think that is a fitting description for most of them. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, a lot of people reach the point where they really like to log in and buy a ship off contracts and immediately contribute, but it's challenging. So we've tried to help out a little bit with that by having SRP, mainly funded just by, we'll kill something blingy as an alliance, and people will drop the loot into a corp hangar, which we liquidate every once in a while. So SRP helps a little bit in getting people back out in space and spaceships, blowing up Minmatar. But it is a persistent problem in the alliance. I think one way to maybe help that is, again, to have SRP, and one way to continue SRP would be to enable a alliance tax on LP, which is something I've made a couple Reddit shit posts about. I think, those weren't original thoughts. I mean, other people have asked for that for a long time. Whether or not we'll see any movement on that,
So
I'm unsure.
you could tax your members by making a buyback program, and you take a little cutoff and you manage the material as a alliance corporation, and they get the ease of just dumping the LP on you.
So how would you suggest doing that exactly, though? Because the LP, you have to redeem it. And
Yeah,
it falls
so
on someone to
you
sell
would
it.
buy the items that the LP comes out of the LP.
Yeah,
So
EM
you have,
has a LP buyback program when we're in militia
Yeah.
Right.
for Typhoon fleet issues mostly.
yeah, so you wouldn't pay
As
them
you know,
for
we
LP.
like Typhoons. Yeah.
You'd pay them for the items. They'd make the item for you and sell it to you. So it's a buyback program that costs them their LP. You take a little off the top, 5-10%, and then you make money. They have easier LP dumping, and then it just kind of ends up working out.
Right. So we do have an LP buyback program. My issue with it is to just, it's, as far as quality of life, that's a lot of things that have to go right. A lot of time, someone's time, a lot of member time calculating how much they owe. To a certain extent, unless you're going to track it, you have to rely on people to do it honestly, which I honestly, I trust my guys, but relative to other like taxation systems in Eve, which are effortless, you just set a percentage and DS just goes to an alliance wallet or corp wallet. It seems like a lot of effort. I'm not against putting in effort, but it would seem like a relatively easy change. And I know that in Eve Online, some things that you think would be easy to code are not always the case. So that's on CCP side, but it would seem to me that it wouldn't be that difficult to make an alliance or corp LP wallet and just a percentage ticker that you could siphon off a little bit of LP to help your guys with SRP if your corp or alliance is interested in something like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
At least I thought.
Sorry. In terms of, I know you're talking about SRP and stuff, but in terms of making ISK, are you finding that like the resource redistribution, like that whole process that we're going through basically all of 2020, did that really affect you guys at all, or did you not notice too much things happening?
It didn't really affect us that much, and mainly just because we don't own any moons. I mean, a couple of us started to mine every once in a while, just because we noticed the price of ore was fluctuating a lot, and so maybe it was worth our time as far as ISK per hour. But we don't actually own any moons in the war zone, and even if we did, I mean, to make reasonable ISK per hour would probably require fielding expensive ships, which would definitely absolutely be blown up by dock workers or snuffed out or min-mill blops gangs. I mean, we're not down a chain with a bunch of tunes sitting on gates that can relay that there's enemies coming. We're within direct blops range of a lot of hostiles and direct cap range of a lot of them as well.
Have you, and this goes for RC as well, have you guys noticed any more people like mining in Losec, especially with Noxium and stuff?
I have, but not in the war zones. I've noticed a lot of people mining in low-sec outside of the war zones. I've done mining myself in low-sec outside of the war zones. What Mikal said is 100% accurate for the war zones. You can mine if you're like dock workers size, but if you're not, you're just gonna get like immediately dropped on by everybody. In the war zone, that is.
And as she said, dock workers, there is mining in low-sec. I mean, Siege Green, Wrecking Crew, dock workers snuffed out. They call mine with impunity, really, but just because they have so much more that they can bring to bear than any other local group. We've tried to test that a little bit with dock workers. Thus far, our attempts to kill their oracles have not been very successful, frankly.
One was really close to getting one.
Yeah, we didn't. I blame that on myself. I didn't make sure we had a Sino inhib, and people asked me after we admitted, and I was pretty frustrated to find that I did not have one and no one else did. So yeah, dock workers were able to push us off pretty effortlessly. So there is mining in low-sec. I think the redistribution has had an effect, but not necessarily on faction warfare groups. We're frankly just too small and too under-equipped to really field anything in that regard and be able to defend it.
At least in the war zone, yeah.
Yeah.
So you've also, Localist Primary has been growing as an alliance in addition to Dirt and Glitter growing as a corp. Do you find there's any differences between recruiting as an alliance and networking with the other corps compared to growing your own corp?
Definitely. So this is my first time really leading an alliance and building one. I took control of Control V a few years ago, but at that time it was primarily just Dirt and Glitter. So it was just a single corp inside a single alliance. There was no real coordination with other leaders. Of course, there were our directors, but there wasn't really that much to manage. It's frankly a lot more than I thought it would be, which I'm sure others here already knew, but this is all kind of new to me. So yeah, it's interesting. It's fun. It's definitely time consuming though, a lot more so than I thought. I feel a little bit bad now about some of the things I've said and done to other people that were alliance leaders because I kind of, in my ignorance, I assumed that the management was a lot easier, and I figured they were just being drama queens when they kind of complained about the things they had to deal with. So it's been interesting. It's given me a new level of a little bit more. It's endowed me with a little more respect than I used to have for people that do this. But it is a lot of fun. I'm not complaining. I really enjoy being a leader in Control V and fighting Min-Mill in the war zone.
So that's most of the questions I had. Two things to end on. Is there anything else you would like to talk about in regards to faction warfare? And do you want to stick around as we talk about the Winter Nexus, as you said you were crabbing?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to stick around. One little nugget that I keep on thinking about that I'll offer up to you that maybe you can offer some insight on is in the context of crabbing in faction warfare space and making this for members. One of the things we didn't really talk about was, mission running when your faction is doing well and in a high tier can be pretty profitable. I think CCP recently nerfed that a little bit, but they haven't nerfed it enough to make it not profitable. What I want to talk about is the tunes we see around the war zone that are constantly flipping from faction to faction running. I think in Min-Mill recently I've seen 4, I don't know if it's daredevils, just working around constantly pulling missions. And so these individuals just flip from faction to faction and farm pretty much nonstop. And
level 5s exist, so.
Right. But I do think that it's a little bit unhealthy for people to just hop on the bandwagon when your faction's doing well, because then all the other people that are cashing out their items that are actually in the faction have to compete with them in the market. And so it just kind of floods the market and waters down your ISK per LP cash out. Also, in addition to that, I think the botting has gotten pretty bad as far as plexing bots. I mean, we've seen them around our staging pretty frequently. They just, warp
You always
off
see
as
the
soon as
3
they-
Dramiels with the 3 Jackdaws, right?
Yeah, but the people, you'll see a toon sitting in a Plex, and it'll just warp off immediately. And
The
tricks.
plexing bots.
Yeah, there are tricks you can do to catch them, which I think Diana Kim in the Calgal Warzone has taken pretty much to an art. If you look at their kill board, it's just the Asteros farming coercers all day. I do think, I'm not knowledgeable enough about these kinds of things to pretend to give CCP good advice on how to deal with it, but I do think it would be nice to see more attention go into attempting to deal with the bots.
So
I mean, they're doing a lot, but it's hard to see on our side what's actually happening. Botting is an issue in this game, and it is. I'm not going to derail this. Anyway.
I kind of expect that the Triglavian invasions and the mechanics that were surrounding the Triglavian invasions are eventually going to be somehow applied to faction warfare in a revamp later. That's kind of like my gut feeling, and I wonder if something like that would be harder for the bots.
No. The way bots work, they can be programmed to do whatever the hell you want them to do. The complexity of Eve to play is not difficult enough to make botting difficult to do. The problem is that it's a simple game to play, and the inputs required are simple, and it's really easy to write a script that will run it.
All right. Arcia, do you have anything? Arcia, have anything else?
I think that's I'm done with this issue. No. We can move on.
I have one question. What is the best way to join faction warfare, and how would you recommend new players get into it?
Do you want to take that, Arcia, or do you want me to?
I mean, go ahead. You're the guest. You first, and I can respond.
So I think the best way to join, in my opinion, would be to look up the most active corps in Minmatar Militia and Amar Militia on Zkill, and then get in touch with a recruiter in one of those corps. If you want to, you can join the either militia to start off with, join some public fleets, join some comms, talk to some people, see if you like the culture there. I personally would not recommend joining either CalMil or GalMil. I think Black Rise is pretty dead. I think it's ashes at this point, due to the exodus of both GalMil and CalMil to our war zone. So yeah, I would look in either Minmatar Militia or Amar Militia. Look at the most active corps and make decisions. Control V is recruiting. I believe EM is as well.
Did you say Control?
His alliance ticker is Control V, as in
Control V. Okay.
Local is primary is Control V. Because as you see in the chat when you called in for extra moderators, that's local is primary. That's what they do in local. They're quite.
Are those the guys who are clubbing in chat there?
We're very talkative.
Yeah. Okay.
Just ask.
They're with you? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'll ease up on
them. On some fights, you have to like a alliance block just to see local, right?
Yeah. To put it in perspective, when we last joined Tappy for our last testcation, we blew up their alliance chat so much that their members complained. You hear Test FC say every once in a while the local is primary, and we remember that they, even in Test, they couldn't really deal with the Spurg. They weren't really ready for it.
Wow, Outspurg Test, that is amazing.
Anyway, what Mikal said is, I would pretty much agree with it. It was a very objective take on joining faction warfare. The Galente and Caldari zone is really, really suffering right now. The Minmatar and Amar sides are both full of relatively good groups to join, and you should look in and do exactly what he said. Look at the corps that are active on both sides and see what kind of catches your fancy. I obviously prefer like RP stuff, but I know that's not everybody's bag of chips.
Have you guys noticed? I know, like you were mentioning, the Caldari Galente war zone has kind of petered off, right? And there does seem to be a lot of ebb and flow between the two groups. Have you guys noticed any influx from those groups that have joined
The lower chords joined Windmill.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
what
was
I was
pretty
getting
big.
at, right? Have you noticed them? Have you noticed them their presence around the war zone? Because they were huge in Calmo.
Yeah, we've started to see them. They pretty much just arrived over, so we've seen some of them in a few of our fleets. But I think some people are still moving, and they're starting to network with us. They're on the Discord now, and the militia Discord, and so yeah, we have seen them pop up and start to be active.
We have seen CalMel people around the war zone. So Spartan and I are good friends. Spartan from Templus Calcif, and as you know, that entity is now part of Wrecking Crew. But his people in Templus Calcif have access to our staging whenever they want some faction warfare content. They can jump them down. They routinely fold into our fleets, so we're happily flying along Calcif refugees from the other war zone.
That is good. I remember I have very fond memories of flying in the near Sujarento and flying into the last Spartan in their entire group and getting absolutely dumpstered. So it's glad to see that they're still out there. I love that group for what they do in the Alliance tournament type things. They show how insanely talented they are. So it's nice to see that they're finding you're giving them a couch to lay on.
Yeah, and they give me a couch to sit on every once in a while. I think that's probably one of the common ties of people that used to fly around Black Rise is running into Spartan at one point or another and getting dumpstered. It's pretty. I always got baited on the free Claymore. She fixed in a Claymore. I was off gate. Oh, I have him tackled. All before you know, local spikes 20, and there's Spartan shooting you in the face with Osprey Navy issues or some other really awful comp.
Yeah, it's never bait until it's bait.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Never trust Shufixty in a Claymore. Never shoot him.
All right. We're tracking some news. We don't know if it's actually credible yet. We've gotten 2 sources on it, but a third disagrees. And then we have some outstanding questions, but it looks like code might have split in half. And we know there's a new group called Control that's doing a lot of war decking. That's why I asked you if you're with Control, but you're with Control V. I don't think they're the same thing, unless I'm mistaken.
They're not.
Definitely not.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Well, listen, nice to listen to Faction Warfare. And next we'll talk about something related, and that is the Winter Nexus that just happened. Hey, let's tell us what your thoughts were on that. You did a lot of that. And how was it overall as an event? Was it successful?
So I feel like it was definitely a successful event. We had a lot of people participating in high sec and low sec, and surprisingly even null sec. I had a lot of my viewers were doing them in null sec quite a bit. It was a lot of fun to do in low sec. The idea that somebody could jump you and fight you at any time was quite exciting, and I was kind of trying to learn how to fly cheap things to make it work, which was a lot of fun. And then it's fun to do. I enjoyed doing it. The reward was great for basically every sector of space. It was reasonable. I really like that they tried something different with this one, because normally in events the null sec has the best rewards. They made the best rewards in low sec this time, which means that anybody could participate in it and anybody could be running in any of the areas where it was most lucrative. And there was always a threat of somebody else coming around. The exploration side was on fire. Like, all kinds of people were doing exploration all the time. The sites were always being ran. I made a lot of friends, had a lot of fun during the event. So my personal experience of it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a stealth nerf to the exploration before the end of it?
I don't know.
Somebody who I know who was running the exploration one said at some point the exploration sites were cut very drastic. It was near the end of the Winter Nexus, so not for most of it. It was very, very lucrative.
So what happens during these events that is very common is during the first couple weeks, they only go for like a month or so. but during the first couple weeks or even the first day, really, the value of the stuff that you get is really high. And then there's always people that complain as the first couple days, oh, I'm not making as much as X person or Y person. And then 2 weeks later that changes, and then 3 weeks later that changes, because as those items make it to the market that you find, their value drops. The glacial skins, for example, are probably at an all-time low right now, and they'll only do anything but climb. So the stuff meets the market, price drops. When you see the little estimated value in the bottom corner, it's less than it was before. And people pick up patterns. Well, 2 weeks ago, this was better. Now it's less. There must have been a nerf. There's no other explanation. I got less loot than I did 2 weeks ago, but it was because the market prices change, and it definitely drops. I could be wrong on this one. There could have been like a clear, like, this was definitely not dropping. Like if we're counting the number of boxes on average that you got, that might be a thing, because you got a lot of
participation
effects.
Hateless, it's participation. It's a classic hype cycle. It happens with everything that gets introduced to EVE Online. It has the same hype cycle, price development all the time.
Yeah, and that's I guess I'm trying to explain that, but basically prices are high to start, they tank, people are like, no loot. The same thing has happened over Abyss for a long time. Abyss suffered it as well, because when Abyss first came out, everything was super valuable, and people were like, did they change the loot tables? Nope, they didn't change the loot tables. The value of the loot just isn't as high as it was before. So
I thought one thing in that regard that was kind of nice about this event, and I'm not sure if this has been done in previous events, but in the combat sites, one of the primary drops was Overseer's effects, which you can just sell to NPCs, so that you could just do that. There was no kind of inflation of those items, and reduction in market value was nice. I think that helped a good bit.
yeah, I think that helped. It does make it somewhat of an ISK faucet. I think I sold 7 billion ISK to NPCs, which
Wow.
is a little silly. What was I going to say? The fact that you get an item though, and you have to move it to secure it, makes it a little bit riskier than just getting like liquid ISK. It doesn't just like, hey, you completed the site, here's ISK. Here's an item, you have to move it to get your reward. And until you move it, you don't get anything.
You could always
So
do
it does
something
make
like
it-
mobile depots, right?
I mean, you still have to pick it up and get it to the station. You get it to the station, it still has to be moved to the DD station to sell it.
Yeah, but you can high sec filament after you grab it all. So like you leave the ship, you still have all the stuff in the mobile depot that reinforces. And then you can just come back and high sec filament out, right?
That's a good tip. But I think the point is that you have to turn it in, which gives you interception possibilities. Was there any evidence that was happening? Were people pirating the hard work of people in this winter?
Oh, for sure. There in high sec, the contestment stuff was so much fun. So I'll admit I found out a way to win like every time, and so people got kind of sour. But basically what happens is the person who does the most damage to a wreck in this site, sometimes wrecks are given to the person who did the last shot, sometimes they're given to the person who does the most damage. In this site, it was most damage. And if you were in a high sec site with another person, all that mattered was clearing that last wreck. So you come in at the very end of the site, and you get the most damage on the wreck. You get the wreck. They have to go suspect to get the wreck, or you can grab it. Yeah. It was a lot of fun to do the contests. I enjoyed doing that. The competitive side is definitely there. And low sec, of course, you would actually fight for the site, which was fun. I had a few encounters in that as well, both fun and also not so fun.
I had some good fights in nullsec in some of the sites when I was soloing with a Harbinger. So
but yeah,
it was a good driver of content.
Yeah, definitely. The cool part about the mining side of it is only mining and industry ships were allowed into the mining sites. So if you got into a mining site and held it, and a bigger fleet didn't come in, it was pretty easy to actually control your mining site and kind of hang out there and just relax and have a good time, because you wouldn't have to worry about the random thing coming in. And then in the combat sites, capos weren't allowed in, so they had to bring in subcaps to.
I did
deal
see
with you.
people using battle nearuses and battle procurers to fight each other in the industrial sites. So
Yes.
there was definitely like fighting in the industrial sites because of procurers
for
and
sure.
nearuses.
One of the things that I thought they did really well on this one is if you'd done some of the other sites, if you'd only done like a handful of them, sometimes you didn't make a lot, right? Because it felt like the rewards were very streaky. Either you got like a 300 mil drop or you got like 4 20 mil drops in a row. They seem to even it out and normalize a little bit more. So the peaks aren't as high, but the lows, the averages seems to be a little bit better. So even if you only have time to do 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 of them, you're still getting a pretty reliably good amount of ISK for each and every one.
They seem to be. We had a show on this on Tuesday with Ash Jarathi, and we went through all the events of the last year and probably what they'll have this year. And he said they really have been fine-tuning the, I guess, the loot tables or the rewards for these kinds of events. Do you guys think that they got into a sweet spot here with this one?
I think they nailed it personally. Like I know, and I don't want to throw it all on him, but I know CCB Deadlift on Twitter, after every single event, he's going out there saying, "Hey guys, what do you think about the rewards? Any like feedback, blah, blah, blah." And he's definitely like taken a lot of this feedback and acted upon it. Obviously, he's not the only one. Twitter is not the best way to get the information either. So I'm sure they have other avenues for which they get it. But that's just one that stuck out to me through some of the events.
The last one, the Halloween event, I feel like the reward was really well balanced. For this event, I feel like it may have been a little too lucrative, but they that's easily adjustable. But I do think that it was a little bit too profitable because it's a definite injection of ISK into the system with the overseer effects. And this time we also had a lot of blueprints coming out of them too that are also fairly valuable. But yes, it was a great way to make ISK just recently. But like I said, I feel like it was just a little bit too valuable.
Well, it was the Christmas one. I think they were going to turn it up a little bit. You know, they're going to turn it to 11 this time.
Well, as long as they only faucet ISK into the system, it's actually not a problem. That can be easily adjusted. It's when they are too friendly with all the other stuff that it messes up with the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. Another thing about go ahead with the rewards, Hateless.
So what came out of this event that was special, aside from ISK, is the new implants. Can't remember what they're called right now, but they help your capacitor in slots 1 through 6. Those came out in mid, low, and or in mid grade, low grade, and high grade, as well as the slaver implant. So both of the Sancha sets, is Raptures and I can't remember what they're called.
Nirvanas are also they're shield.
Yep. Yeah, so those guys dropped in all grades and all different variants. So they got introduced in the game, and that I can't wait to see what they're actually going to be at value because they haven't been introduced in the LP stores, but I am pretty excited for that as they are pretty cool implant sets.
Yeah, right now, well, during the Nexus event, at least when I was on, that was the only way to get the Rapture implants. They don't exist yet in the LP stores. I assume they're gonna do what they did with the Nirvanas and the other ones, so they'll come to the Sancha LP store probably on Tuesday, or the next time CCB does a big patch. So those things are very, very high value for the moment before they kind of settle down in price.
The other thing is, I noticed they're giving LowSec a lot of, I don't know, attention, I guess. You know, people say like LowSec's always bypassed by, because all your changes are either HighSec or NullSec. But it seems like a lot of the stuff that's going on or not going on in LowSec is helping activity there. Would you guys agree? And I'm talking about specifically that there was a lot of lucrative rewards for this event in LowSec, but also there's no ESS in LowSec either.
I think that this is CCP recognizing that LowSec is the most dangerous space, and I think that's very true for, like, obviously different regions differ But overall, I think low sec is where you're most likely to be brutally murdered if you're not paying very close attention, and it makes sense to have the biggest rewards be there for something like this.
That's a bold statement.
I think
Right?
it's kind of healthy as well. I mean, as was pointed out already, the rewards in low sec for this winter event were, I think, the best. I think they were. I didn't actually do any of these sites in null or high, but I believe that they were the most profitable in low. And
They were by far.
yeah, and that generated
Most
a lot of
profitable.
content in low sec because I think other people realized that the low sec sites were the most profitable, and so you actually had people come in from high sec and from null to run them, and then somebody gets tackled on the outside of one of these things. Different groups go in and try to kill them. Groups go and kill one another. I mean, it was really nice. It was a lot of fun. As someone who lost a ship or two in them, I still really appreciated it.
Just
So,
real quick,
yeah.
do you guys? This is more for the low sec people. Do you guys hope that the filaments kind of come back in terms of filaments that'll send you straight to low sec and filaments that'll send you back to high sec, or do you hope that they like stay as like one-off event type things?
I mean, one part of me says that I really like the high sec filaments because I'm like a roamer and I'll roam around in lower null and then just want to like dock up somewhere and if I have loot or something, I can drop it off real fast without doing the deposit and a Citadel trick and having to wait for 20 days. So it is really nice to have those high sec filaments to just leave. But on the other hand, like, I don't know, there's something to be said for like prior to that, how I have like a depot and probes and I have all this planning that lets me uniquely get back versus an easier way of doing it, if that makes sense. Like maybe it's more Eve to reward the planning with the probes and the depot, but as opposed to just having a convenient option.
I'm also kind of
I'm split.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just I'm conflicted. Go ahead, Mikal.
I was going to agree. I like that there exists a mechanism where somebody can just immediately, appear in low sec, because then the people who live in low sec get to fight them. They get to fight us. It generates content, but on the other hand, I don't really like the idea of somebody that enjoys relative safety. The vast majority of the time, they do PvE in Eve, can then just undock and click a module and be immediately brought to content while offering none really to anyone else. I don't know if that's if everyone would agree with that, but for example, if you just sit in the staging system of a really large null block and crab all day, and anybody that comes to try to kill you is just immediately annihilated by you and 200 of your closest friends, I don't really feel like it's fair necessarily that you should be able to get instant content by just undocking whatever you want and just miracle yourself in the low sec and then getting one-on-ones. But I'm admittedly a little bit biased in that perception.
Okay, my turn, I guess. I really think that it'd be good for the long-term health of the game to have filaments to come back to high sec as well as to low sec, as it gives the ability for a shorter game session to be possible. So right now, the being able to yeet out allows for a shorter game session to be possible, where you can only commit like half an hour or so. But if you were able to go, say, live in high sec, and then be able to yeet out to and go try and steal a few ESSs, and then, I mean, you only had half an hour. Now you're out in nullsec with your ship that you successfully had content with. You can die and explode and go home, or you can save that ship for the next session. You can go back to high sec. The ability to do that makes the time commitment required to play the game in a fun kind of roamy way, which is what we want more of, right? We want more small gangs roaming around. We want more people, flying in random places, because that generates random encounters, which is what this game is about. Being excited wise, like, that is one thing that drives Eve. I mean, if you watch the old Butterfly Effect video that came out, or that was in like 2004 or whatever, but that video is off the premise that you can find a random encounter, and those random encounters are scarce, but adding the ability to have a short session that generates or that gets people moving out and around in small to large or small to medium gangs is fantastic, in my opinion. Having 15-man gangs flying around, there needs to be a player limit to it, of course, but I think that filaments going every direction are good for the health of the game in the long term.
You might have convinced me just now that filaments were a good thing for the game, because I figured that short session stuff allows there to be less roaming and less groups. But I see what you're saying. If all the bottlenecks are in like low null, then in the backfield, there's a lot less people, a lot less population, because nobody can ever make it there. They get fished out at the borders. So what you're saying is a diversity of being able to just jump over those choke points and get to some random place allows other people to have random encounters.
It's not just the choke points. It's the fact that it takes time. It takes a lot of time to go from one region to another. It just takes forever. And having that time commitment to sit down to get that 2-minute fight, you spend half an hour to find a 2-minute fight, that's not rewarding. Compared to like any other game, you're immediately rewarded with content for starting to play the game. And in Eve, you have to commit a lot of time to do that. It just having that shorter game session where you can log in and play for half an hour, or you can log in and play for an hour, or the fact that it scales to as long as you want, but the fact that you can have a shorter game session and get content is awesome.
Garcia?
Well, I think that stuff like Wormholes and Thera, which has like the public bookmarks, already exist as mechanisms that allow people to do this to a degree. It just takes a little know-how and a little work. Sometimes, like, because when I'm not filamenting, I'm like Thera scum, right? I just go to the nearest Thera hole. I call it Thera scum. I call myself Thera scum, right? I go to the nearest Thera hole, and I just jump to whatever regions happen to look tantalizing that are connected to Thera, and I find people to fight pretty quickly without a filament, and then I can go home via Thera. And
I mean, isn't going through wormholes kind of the same thing, except you have to know about wormholes and understand how wormholes work?
Yes, but part of Eve is about rewarding people for know-how, for the work they do, and I think a lot of it is on us to teach people how to play the game, so they know about all these different ways of getting, like, because the number one reason people get frustrated with Eve is because it's really, really hard to learn how to play the game, like to find your own niche, to find a good group, and to learn how to play the parts of the game that you enjoy. And the filaments kind of seem like a Band-Aid to that. And well, I don't know if they're long-term. They might be short-term beneficial, but they might have other long-term unintended consequences, like maybe buffing the areas of space like way far out that are supposed to be logistically difficult to get to, or kind of making, I don't know, like they give some people might have all of the pros of with none of the cons of certain things.
No, the big con is if you go out to nullsec, if you eat out to nullsec, you are either losing your ship or you're spending a couple hours to get back. And both of those kind of stuff.
That's where the.
I mean, I'm fine with losing the ship. If I get a fight, I'm fine with losing the ship. But if I'm 50 jumps away, and instead of being able to go home, I have to fly 50 jumps or self-destruct, I don't like that. That's not fun. That's not engaging. I'm happy to take the fight. I'm happy to fight you. I'm not excited to sit and fly 50 jumps home.
I mean, you could also carry a depot and probes and look for signatures and just scan your way home. It's usually not that far away.
I mean, yeah, you can.
Elise?
Oh, I was just curious to see how you guys found these temporary filaments. How you found it to change the low sec dynamic. I found it a lot nicer that I could yeet into low sec. I found it weird that I could yeet into high sec from low sec. That seemed kind of busted to me because I could just yeet into this one little area, not see anyone, get some spoils, and then I could just yeet out, and it was fine. I didn't have to explore my way out. I didn't have to do anything. I just suddenly was no longer in danger with all of my stuff. And I would always be like kind of close to Jita, and they're like one man as well. So they're cheap. I could just do it. They were in my redeem queue. Even if I forgot to bring one, I could just go into my redeem queue and go. That seemed a little weird to me.
Yeah.
But I do like the temporary nature of it, because if they're going to be infrequently done, getting people out into low sec to give them like the taste of the pie, especially when it came with this event. Maybe people went out to low sec, they were a little bit afraid. They were like, oh, I don't know what to expect here, blah, blah, blah. And this made it so easy. They got a taste of obscene riches in a sense. Maybe that's going to coax them out a little bit more, make them find a group, make them go into one of these unpopulated areas. So I like that it's infrequent. I think it would be detrimental if it was brought back always. The nullsec filaments, I'm all for, right? Because there is no way back. As Hateless mentioned, you either go there and you die, or you have to take a lot of jumps back or probe yourself back and something like that. But the idea is you go out there with the express intention of probably dying, right? Like that's the goal. Being able to then sit out there, roam for 20 minutes, and then send yourself back to Jita without losing anything felt a little wonky. And I know there are like mechanics where you can do it, but as Arceus said, you have to put the work in. And that's, maybe I'm just being an old Eve man here, like an Eve boomer, but that's part of what makes Eve enjoyable to me. Like getting that final kill, or getting that like long sought after kill is more worth it to me, because there was a lot of effort that went into it. I know it's not just something that's promised to me that I can just turn on and get whenever I want. I had to hunt for it. I know it's fleeting. I know it's not going to always be there. And I know there's
pun intended
difficulty involved in it. Yeah.
I think that I have some of that Eve boomeritis too, where like, I feel like I know about that there are public bookmarks. I know about using a depot and probes. I feel like a badass because I can move around so easily when maybe not everybody can. And like part of the fun is feeling like a badass, you know?
Like you can swim where other people have to drown because they don't know how to swim. That's true in complicated disciplines. Like I said, I was a graphic designer at a pretty high level for a long time, and using Photoshop, when I would teach classes, I would say at a certain point you will feel like you can swim in this program. There's nothing you can't do. There's 5 ways to do any one thing, but until then, you're going to feel like you have cement shoes, in a lake, and that's a terrible feeling. So there is a split there. By the way, Elise, I like the way that you put it, because every time I see that's not Eve, I'm thinking that's un-American. And I'm thinking, no Canadian ever says that's un-Canadian.
No true Scotsman. Right.
Okay, there's that. But the idea is not only is the game constantly changing and the people who are playing it constantly in, tumult, they're changing all the time too. The Eve that you played might be dead for all we know. Nobody has a handle on everything. Not even the devs know all of Eve. So Eve is kind of however you enjoy it. There is a thing, though, that PvP says, look, PvPers say we should be able to kill you any place, regardless. And the defense of that is, okay, but you have to travel to me. And that's the trade-off. Like, if you want to kill me, I'm going to live somewhere that's far away from you. And you have to travel to me to kill me, but you can kill me wherever I'm at. That seems to be fair. And if you take that part away because PvPers want more action, that seems pretty unfair. Like, that's not, you're breaking the deal that we had. I got to be able to defend myself by putting distance between you and me.
You have numbers in your home space.
I like the idea of randomness if the game wasn't just so always combat heavy. Like nobody's yeeting that I know of to like just pure explore to see new systems they hadn't seen
Some
before.
people, exploration actually, but yeah.
Yeah, exploration. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it seems like yeeting is really liked by the guys that want to get out there and encounter somebody to kill all the time.
I've definitely seen people who do exploration use the yeet filaments, people who do the scanning and exploration. So,
Yeah.
Because there's the two types of filaments that go to null, the noise and the signal. So the signal are really good for the PvPers. The noise are used by the PvPers who are running away when we're being camped in a pipe. And they're used by explorers for getting to quiet systems.
Right. I like that astero yeeting is a thing. You yeet out and make your way home. I love that. That's like casting your sail, seeing where it takes you kind of thing.
But
Yeah, that's my favorite part of it too, because they like the explorers then have the ability to probe themselves back with the wormholes, right? They have the equipment on their ship. That's actually what they went out to do anyway. So if you're in a Stratios, a Tengu, or like an Astero, like you yeet out to the great unknown, and then you spend the rest of the night like exploring on your way back. That is some really fun content that comes out of it.
So somebody in chat reminded me that POC filaments exist, and the fact that I forgot them. I have something to talk about POC later, but the fact that POC filament.
Let's go to POC.
Yeah.
Let's talk about POC. Right. Get us up to speed on that.
So first, I just wanted to say the fact that POC filaments exist and that filaments that eat you from POC to minor victories exist mean we already have an effective high sec, low sec filament.
So adding in a high sec filament literally just makes it so I don't have to take 2 filaments, I just have to take 1.
Yeah, because the POC and the minor victories filaments aren't going away. They're not temporary. Anyway, there has been some news about POC. The Rarevos Proving Grounds, which was an attempt at a not red don't shoot community in POC centered around Rarevos, seems like they're closing their doors on Sunday, the 17th of January. The lack of content in POC seems like it's pushing out, based on my source, that the lack of content in POC is pushing the people who are trying to build the not red don't shoot community in POC away from the region, and that is probably, I don't know if we can call it the nail in the coffin for POC, but like the region really has nothing going on anymore.
It really is just the region lock gates in a lot of it. There's a really well done write-up by Laura Secco Cross, who was one of the CSM candidates for last season's. He's part of Hard Knocks Associates, and he spent dozens and dozens and dozens of hours in Pochven. And he basically came to the same conclusion that I think everyone is coming to now, which is that, it's a great idea. It's just that the region locking everything behind standings is just...
Well, this is what we were saying from the moment we heard about it on the EdenCom side. I mean, you look back footage on the shows we've done, and it was basically entirely me talking about the region lock gates being a terrible idea, and I think I called it worse than Incarna when the POC came out. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm vindicated a little bit, but
by the way, that was the voice of Tiberius, who's joined us now. He's a wormhole guy that we're going to talk to next.
So
go ahead.
I 100% agree with you. The fact that if you do not have Triglavian standings, you can't go around in Pochven. Like, you can't. But there is a group of people that exists inside there that are making insane amounts of money.
Yeah, we caught the 12 golems that we killed in POC, and everybody was like impressed by that, and I'm just like, they made more money than they lost on that day. Like,
they didn't care about that. They made more money than they lost in that fight in an hour.
During the invasions, we were killing world arcs, and we were shutting our mouths about it because it made so much money. Like, that 80 billion ISK of golems we made is like 4 world arcs, and they were doing it for weeks before we caught them.
What are those?
So, like,
what is the World Arc loot table looking like now? Is that still dropping
officer mods? And,
officer mods?
yeah.
Okay.
But the thing about the region lock gates is that they spent all of Chapter 3 setting up the two sides, the Edencom and the Triglavians, and people joined both sides. And then we fought over a bunch of systems, and a lot of the systems had actual PvP combat between the two sides, and there were some really good fights going in favor of one side or another. Both sides had some pretty good fleet victories in PvP. And then at the end of the whole thing, they released the Pokven region, and the Triglavians, from their standing, they get free access to move around the region. And then the other side of the conflict gets nothing, even though we won more systems. And we can't really participate in Pokven beyond individually scanning. Like, we can get into any specific one system, but we can't go from gate to gate. So, like, the region isn't very appetizing to us. So now it's basically like if they took faction warfare and set the side, we're going to choose one of the sides, and only they can jump between gates in the region. And how much conflict are you going to have at that point?
There is something that is coming to light that I've been working on for the last week.
Sound like Lebowski.
But we're thinking that this is a thing, and we're trying to prove it or disprove it. But when there's a wormhole into Pochven, and regardless of what space, there's Rasnaborg around. Yeah. And you can fight those Rasnaborg. We have a theory that possibly your standings influences how aggressive they are when you engage them.
So, like, they aggress you if you're negative standings.
Yeah, but no, like how aggressively they respond with response fleets and scale that up. So we're still playing with it, but I have seen some serious engagements between NPCs and myself, and NPCs and much larger fleets than myself, and it is kind of exciting as we're developing and exploring the fact that this even exists, as it only really came to light to me at least a couple weeks ago.
It's just that they built up a conflict between two sides, and how much conflict are you going to expect to have, and content in the region are you going to expect to have if, like, one of the sides that was actually looking forward to getting a chance to be the invaders for once, to strike back, can't really even engage with the content on a similar level.
For our fans here, can you talk about what Golem?
So the Golems were doing World Arc sites. They're a site that takes about 40 minutes to an hour with a fleet of 15. And it drops a lot of Triglavian salvage and officer mods. And they were very, very lucrative. Like, Pokven Triglavian salvage makes a lot of money because you can use small amounts to build stuff like Nurgles and Ikatersas. And even just selling it is pretty profitable. Like,
it's basically the only way that you can get Triglavian salvage now, which is, you know, if you have a single source of Triglavian salvage, it's what's driving up all of the Tech 2 Triglavian prices, is just because there's only one source for all this material right now.
I'm telling you right now, those prices are going down.
So, like, some people are saying, like in chat, that Edencom was fighting for the status quo, and I don't think they seem to realize that most of the Edencom backbone was RP groups that were loyal to one empire or another. And a lot of the Edencom side was like RP PvPers, right? So we were fighting to enhance our stories, our characters' stories, our alliances' stories, and going against. We enjoyed the story. We wanted to be on one side or another. And, like, at the end, they're just like, okay, no more story. It's over. And there's just no content in the region now.
There is ways to farm the Triglavian T2 salvage outside of Pochven now. That's what I'm telling you guys.
Is it secret? Or is it?
I'm working on understanding it completely, and then I'm going to be making a guide on it.
So it's secret right now.
It's not secret. It's coming out. I'm streaming it all the time. But it is something that is becoming more knowledge or more well known.
Are they spawning outside of the wormholes?
Yeah, they're spawning outside the wormholes, and they scale up to serious engagements, and they drop enough loot that justifies fighting them.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. And I like that point you made, Arcia, that you have a different motivation for playing the storyline. You're making decisions, and the rewards are completely different depending on what decision you make, which seems a little bit unbalanced. And usually I don't care about balance, but it does feel like if you want to make a creative decision, that you shouldn't be penalized for the decision that you make in that way.
EdenCom was, and the thing is, like, EdenCom was pretty much just thought up as a way of protecting the Triglavian supporting players from actual consequences, because instead of losing standing with the empires, they lost standing with this amorphous EdenCom organization that was made pretty much for that reason. It's just pretty annoying. Like even now, the way Triglavians spawn is that the Triglavian wormholes can open up within 4 jumps of where the Pochvan system used to be. So if you have a system that is 3 jumps away from where a Triglavian system used to be, it can have a wormhole spawn, which means Triglavians can be roaming around. So a lot of systems where like EdenCom 1 can have roaming Triglavians. And with the Gunstar response fleets turned off, these Triglavians are pretty much unopposed by the EdenCom forces. So there's like plenty of Triglavians in systems that EdenCom 1 and systems that weren't invaded at all, roaming around in high, low, and even nullsec if some of the systems are close to where nullsec systems are. Like you see that in Ethereum Reach a lot because of ScarCon, for example.
When I hear you guys talk about all these things, one of the things that strikes me as interesting is through 2020, CCP is put through like resource redistribution, scarcity, right? The goal is to reduce the amount of ISK that people are making, et cetera, et cetera. But really, it does seem like they're not nerfing income streams, right? They're nerfing like the high end, like N+1 income streams. Obviously, that's good, but they seem to be mostly just nerfing the institutional knowledge that EVE players have had over the years and accrued over the years of what was a good way to make money or what is a good way to make money. All of those like new best ways to make money are these like weird interactions, like, oh, let's go to Pochvan, let's grind world arcs, let's find these Triglavians outside of wormholes, and people are talking about how they're making like billions of ISK an hour, 400 to a billion ISK an hour with doing these things, and it's just neat to see that in an era of scarcity, what's really scarce is not necessarily there are new income streams coming in that people are stumbling upon and kind of like being hush hush about because they don't want other people to know, but they're stumbling on this like this crazy information. They're finding the golden goose and they're like hoarding it for themselves in a way. It's really fun.
I think a lot of what's happening is the ways to make money have changed from let's rat in anomalies and get liquid ISK to a more commodity-based way of generating income. So maybe it's something to try to stop inflation, but I see a lot more stuff like the Winter Nexus sites where they're dropping items to sell and stuff like the World Arc where it's like salvage and modules to sell. And I think that's going to be a trend going forward, that income's going to be commodity based and not so much rate my ticks, how big are my ticks?
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I think that seems to be the trend that CCP has shown as of recently. that I think we're gonna be moving towards a commodity-based market rather than a liquid ISK-based market. At least that's what they're maybe trying to do in the long run.
Yeah,
All right.
I think that'll be good for the game, and I think that's awesome. Having
Okay.
commodities.
Elise, did you bring up what you wanted to bring up there?
Yeah, that was it. That was my fun little moment.
All right. Well, last thing we want to talk about before we end today is Wormhole Space, and check out what's going there with Tiberius, who's with us now. How's it going, Tiberius?
Doing well, thank you.
What's up?
So, there's a lot going on. I guess there's a lot to talk about with what's going on with Wormhole Space. Just recently we had a fight on Friday. Exit Strategy and Wholesale basically were evicting Wronghole Alliance, and they ended up bad-voting a bunch of people because they got a frigate hull connection and were able to get numbers in for their defense. And that was one of the bigger fights that we've seen in Wormhole Space for a while. I think it was close to 300 billion ISK. Now, half of the side, what was interesting is that half of the ISK lost was actually valued in the Vehement that was lost from that fight. And that fight was being streamed live, and a lot of people who were watching it were making an interesting, tactical observation is the proper word, I should say, is that all of their subcap killer dreads that they had fit were shooting spit wads at 150 kilometers, sometimes, or 100 kilometers, sometimes upwards of 150, and they weren't able to actually do anything that was necessary for the fight. But the problem is that their Unchained Alliance had to contend with what is, with the frigate hulls. And, this may be an argument of CCP saying, well, this was working as intended. This fight probably wouldn't have happened if, the defenders didn't get in the reinforcements needed to make this fight happen. And, we'll talk about this later because I do have a show planned later this evening, a little more in depth, but this is kind of a symptom of CCP's Band-Aid over the bullet hole issues with Wormhole Space, and I would say with the game at large to a lot of extent as well. And what was unfortunate is that Unchained also lost a bustard with all of the loot that they managed to loot off of the field, because they did end up winning the day because the fight was over the hull timer for the Fortizar. And of course, whenever a structure dies in Wormhole Space, there's no asset safety for it to go to, so all of the cans just popcorn everywhere. So they managed to get everything. I think that buster was valued at about 60 billion ISK, which was probably close to half to 2/3 of the total value that they pulled out of the cans. It looks like that they packed that thing jam tight full of a bunch of the smaller stuff that they could, fit into a single DST. And so they ended up getting ganked, and it was not, Wow. I think in a large respect, you could say that these guys ended up going ISK negative for this eviction. Most evictions these days are done for money and for grudges, and more and more evictions are being done for money because of we're in a bit of a cycle phase right now with Wormhole Space, where a lot of corps are dying out. They don't have the membership that they used to, so they're being culled. And this is just the normal. It's just the normal thing that happens in Wormhole Space. So,
well, is that all?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. The other thing, because you just reminded me that corps are dying, and we didn't talk about this, I don't think, on the show, but I did write it in the newsletter. By the way, if you want the newsletter, I'll show you how to get it just now. This is an in-game newsletter. It's called TIS News, and just subscribe to the mail list. There's your instructions on how to do that. It's in your mail. Just subscribe to the mail list, TIS News, and you'll get the newsletter that we send out every weekday. And in that, we did cover some stuff we haven't covered on these shows or even the daily shows, and that is that Paxton Federation, I think they used to be called Paxton Industries, folded. Long-time Pravi block went up to gentleman's agreement, and I knew some people in there, and it's too bad to see them fold after a long time. But other news is that Trigger Happy has dismantled, and a lot of them moved over to, I'm drawing a blank, Volta, right?
Yeah, Volta is quietly in the north building this like super group. They're building up to a pretty massive size. And it is actually great to see in the ash, as kind of a Spirit Tiberius said, like in the ashes of some of these groups that can't survive or are getting culled. Volta is definitely the phoenix that is rising out of all that.
Yikes. And they're under pressure from Fraternity when Fraternity is taking over Tribute and Veil up there, right? Like there's definitely a war going on. We should probably take a closer look at that. But if Volta's growing in size, maybe they aim to compete against that Fraternity wave.
I think that they definitely are looking to do so. I know that Volta's original membership, and this could be completely different, so don't directly quote me on this, but I know that Volta's membership, or at least the older membership, which may be their leadership now, was more of an Eastern European time zone. Which puts them in, a capability of contesting the Chinese time zone. So, they may end up being in a position to where they can do the things that they want, or whatever it is that they've got planned.
I think their main FCs are still like Western Europe. Like they kind of lost the Russian Thunder Squad type of groups.
Gotcha. Okay.
But they're also showing that they're US time zone heavy now too, which is kind of interesting, right? This is like the crucial moment, and I don't want to get off track too much, but this is like the crucial moment when you're building an alliance. You can't be like too time zone focused. You can't really exist and be successful essentially if you can only be in one time zone. So when you see the point where Volta can now be a pretty formidable force in two time zones, US and European time zone, that's kind of the point where they get a little bit scary, and you gotta kind of watch out for them. But so far they've been flying under the radar. We don't want to put too big of a light on them because they've been doing great work. But it's definitely something you guys should be watching.
Yeah, and by scary you mean that's when they get capable of doing things. So scary against you as your enemy. Okay.
Yeah, scary is only bad if you're not with them, right? So, but it does seem that they're setting like a really good trend. They're kind of playing the Black Legion role in a way, but now they've got two time zones to work with. They're nomadic. They kind of have no friends. They have this little patch of space that they accidentally took, and now they're just loving it. But definitely something to watch out for.
Well, they were hyping up SMA, which was kind of funny. You don't really think of Volta and SMA together like that. I was like, really? But yeah, they vouch for SMA, saying it's a new group, good group, and that sort of thing. I don't know how that's going, but there must have been something there. I don't know. But I guess the final question is this a time where groups are collapsing? Is there something going on because it feels like there's been a rash of alliances closing?
So I'll tell you, the wormhole space is really small, and I'm sure that some of the faction warfare guys can share this sentiment here. The community is pretty small. We're seeing a lot of shift in mentality, not only from CCP, but from the player base. I can say that, wormhole space used to be full of people. While it was sparsely populated, it was full of people who were willing to put the time, effort, and energy that was required in order to play the game. It was obvious to people when you were getting into wormhole space of what was required in order for you to do it. It was essentially a long-term hobby. Now, what you're seeing is there's a lot of corps that have a lot of like passive players that are not, and I'm still speaking about wormhole space here, that are not as active and not as don't necessarily understand that the requirements that you need in order to continue to live in wormhole space. And this may be a bit of a passing of a torch and kind of like a dying of the old way of playing wormhole space. But with Citadel introduction in 2016, 2017, I can't remember which one it was, plus CCP's push to make the game a bit more of an instanced game rather than a long-term commitment. I think that we're definitely seeing, at least from my perspective, in my area of space, we're definitely seeing a departure of, or a brain drain, so to speak, of, old-time players and people who, want to put long-term effort and assets into the game.
Can we say that happened because... would it be fair to say that happened because the wormholes had been nerfed pretty good due to Exuki's great presentation at CSM? Like, do all these things fall in line?
I don't. There's a lot of combination of factors that I believe are coming into the decline of wormhole space. I think that Citadels was one of them. I don't want to solely put it onto Exuki on that particular thing. Excuse my jadedness here, but I don't think that CCP actually fully understands wormhole space. There's a couple of mechanics that we'll discuss in depth in the show that I've got planned for later on this evening. That's going to be exclusively wormhole stuff. First of it was the frig holes, which I described earlier. The second one was essentially the death of the high class living, which was the rolling of extra large wormholes with capital class vessels. So I think that you cannot really pinpoint one specific thing, but I would say that there's a prevalent a consensus amongst the community that CCP doesn't really understand wormhole space as a whole. And the mechanics have been neglected, and because of that, it's become stale, and people are just moving on in a lot of regards.
Interesting. All right. Well,
if you want to move on.
No, Mikal, go ahead. Mikal, go ahead.
In the context of what Tiberius just said, I did want to point something out. So he, just mentioned kind of the wormhole space is declining a bit. Our faction warfare region that Arzia and I share is pretty active at the moment. But before that, it saw a period of decline. We just talked about how dead Pochfin is generally. Black Rise, it's probably never seen a period of inactivity this substantial. If you were an outsider coming to the EVE community for the first time and you were reading like the top posts, this would seem really strange, I think, because on one hand you see a bunch of posts associated with a node crashing because over 6,000 people attempt to enter the same system simultaneously, and then you see all these other comments about other regions of EVE dying.
Yeah.
And I don't really know. I'm not gonna purport to tell CCP what actions they can take to help spread the community out, but it really is kind of bizarre, I think, that you have such a unique environment where you have thousands of systems that players can aggregate in, and you can build your own little corp or little alliance and do your own thing, yet so many people aggregate into like one of two blocks and engage in this gameplay where you can't even really activate your ship modules. To me, that seems really bizarre. I understand the argument for there being value in contributing to something so large. I won't contest that, but I also think there's value in starting up a smaller group and feeling like you own it, and engaging in a different kind of gameplay.
You just hit the $10,000 statement or idea, and that was what was so depressing to me personally about some editorial liberty here about the second part. The second fight was that you had 1/3 of the game all in one place fighting all of one battle, and it just felt small, so small, like that there isn't this is a universe, and there isn't more of a universe out there. We can get into that for a few minutes, but Arcia, go ahead.
I was just pretty much going to agree, like, that it seems like a lot of people have like the preconception that the quote unquote end game is to join a null block and jump into these fights with 10,000 people. But like the reality is, like, there's a lot of people, myself included, fights over a certain size stop being fun because you can't even tell what's going on anymore. Like, you can't, I mean, you can tell what's going on, but like your modules don't activate, everything slows down. It just becomes like a grind. It removes all of like the fun things about actually fighting for me, honestly. Once tie-dye reaches over a certain point, I just want to have like 20 versus 20 people, 40 versus 40 people, like 10 versus 10 people. You get into like hundreds of people versus hundreds of people, and it's just like, I want to be somewhere else, right? And a lot of people don't realize like how fun things can be outside of what they have been told is the end game. And people should try out some other stuff sometime. And
right, like
out.
we have, you have obviously LowSec, as your home stomping grounds, and as well as Wormhole Space, and there's. I definitely agree with the fact that there's for some of these smaller groups, in order for these smaller groups to thrive, there needs to be more information that's put out. So, there's not just one thing that you have to do, and you don't always have to go to the null blocks in order to be successful and to thrive.
At least, you have any thoughts on I don't know, the overall balance of the game that we're talking about now?
So it does, at least this is something that we've kind of danced around and chatted about a little bit over the course of 2020, but it does seem, through what CCP are doing and the changes they're making, the resource redistribution, scarcity, blah, 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 it seems like their mood is more, and this isn't to say that they dislike older players, but that they don't really put the veteran players on the pedestal that they did at some points in their life cycle as a company, right? So they would rather, I think, at this point say, okay, guys that have been here since 2016 or 2006, 2010, we appreciate that you guys have played the game, and we love that you had fun in that version of the game, but we're kind of moving out of your comfort zone here into a different version of the game. For the people that are here now, for the people that are just starting out. So we're pushing you to the side. All that accrued wealth you had, get out of here. We don't want you anymore. We want to like sow the fields for the new generation that's coming up. And it does seem to me that that's what they're trying to do. I don't know if that's a successful thing. I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if it's a bad thing.
They've done it by shoving the money somewhere else, right? They're shutting off the money in nullsec. They're putting the money into, say, POCVin and these events and lowsec. And that's one way to re-incentivize money making. But people still want to group up. They haven't touched that dynamic or even messed with it at all. Like, they're not, and there are games that have done it, right? Like I don't know, that Albion game or whatever I forget what it's called.
Albion, yeah.
Albion, right. Like, they have a way of preserving wolf packs. Like, they've done something, maybe because some EVE devs work on that game, and they said, yeah, this was a problem in EVE. Let's not make it a problem here. So from the get-go, they fixed it. But there is still no disincentive to group up bigger. N+1 is still kind of what wins the day, because farmers can be warriors just as easily as warriors can be warriors, and a warrior can supply an entire army.
I suppose I do feel like the changes that are being made, they're trying to obviously they're definitely moving away from that, right? But they're also trying to push sort of the older minds out of the game as well. Either not maliciously, just like, hey, if you like this version of EVE, cool, it's not here anymore. We're changing it up a little bit, and they're not afraid to make those decisions and to cater to the new groups that are starting to form that we haven't even seen yet, or that we might not see for even like 3 or 4 years from now. But they're paving the way for those groups to exist.
I would say that it seems to me that CCP has pretty much made the statement that they will no longer be held hostage to the veteran players, because this game used to be so small, the community was so small. This happens, I think, with every in development video game, where the game is essentially catered or tailored to the player base. And now that CCP has the backing to do the things that they have the player base to back them in order to do the things that they want, they're essentially saying, like I said, I'll take it a step further and saying they will no longer be held hostage to the veteran players specifically. And
we're talking I think, I don't remember who brought it up. I got a boomer brain going, but we were talking about the second M2, the dev blog that CCP released after that. For me, kind of read like a bit of a downer, right? Like everyone else seemed to like it, but I was like, they're not saying that they're going to look at tech to solve these issues in the future. That they want to be amazed by the numbers and records that we put up. They're just like, yeah, you put too many people in there. Shit broke, guys. and
I kind of liked it.
There was no like, hey guys, we're going to fix this so you can keep doing this. It was like, you screwed up, guys. So good luck with doing that in the future, right? Like, it wasn't that we're going to cater to these big fights. It's going to be like, yeah, well, maybe after this is all done, you guys will just fight yourselves out and we won't have to deal with that problem anymore.
Well, so what's strange about this war and the fact that there's so many people in one system, it is literally all of New Eden. The big blue donut is fighting one little corner of the big blue, the little red spot left in the donut. And that's what's happening. We literally have the entirety of the game fighting, and it boils down into one system. Yeah, you can't expect them to build the servers to deal with that instance because it's probably never going to happen again. Like, that's a poor investment choice. And the fact that so many people have aligned into one small fight is insane.
Well,
I don't think
the fact that you said investment makes a very good point. You can either keep dumping money into the technology to accommodate more and more players. Look, they could barely accommodate 6,500, and now they said that these big groups put in like 1,200. They're not going to get tech to accommodate that many people anytime soon. And where's the money for improving the game going? Is it just for that? Well, probably not. That would be a bad investment. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But they haven't done anything to disincentivize players spreading out. ESS, you could say, or the dynamic bounty system, probably more to the point, spread players out, that sort of stuff. But as far as associations, groups, like the reason you're all here is, except Elise, is you guys have chosen, you've said, I'm making a different decision than the one that everybody says to make, right? You are particularly good at different things in the game, but you've made that decision. It wasn't the path that most people take. And I think, and so did Mikal here. So did Tiberius. I mean, a lot of talking in stations are people who play this game differently and excel at it in a different way. It's not just nullsec. We don't just cover nullsec. And I think we're part of the problem always talking about nullsec. I want to get further away from just the big banner battles and get deep inside of the diversity of EVE Online and the smaller stories that are just fascinating. And Elise is the best example of anyone that I know of somebody who's had it all. He's eaten at the biggest tables, and yet he's the one going through the villages in disguise, looking for the little stories more than anybody else that I know. And that's what we want to do more than anything else, is talk about the richness of the whole fabric.
Did I ever tell you about one time when Elise came to one of my defenses? And so I was FCing, but somebody saw Elise in local and started yelling at him and then didn't show up because they thought Pandemic Legion was coming.
His rep still chases
It
him.
was just Elias.
Yeah.
Ticker tank is real.
Yeah. All right. That's a good place to end, right? Like touting the talking in station's horn. But I do appreciate Arcia and Hateless and Tiberius and all the guys and girls that we have here. We have a lot of girls or females for EVE Online inside of TIS. Not all of them appear on screen, which I'm very happy about because I want that diversity of experience and voices. So anyway, I'm glad that we're all together doing these shows and really bringing a lot of things to the table for people to realize the game is much bigger than just the top stories.
If I could just jump in real quick. So there were some people who were saying, asking about data and stuff like that. There is a wormhole show scheduled this evening. I've got quite a few guests coming on. I've actually got quite a bit of data that myself and my guests are going to disseminate and talk about later this evening. And I'll put it up on screen for you guys to take a look at. So if you're interested in hearing about what I have to say, as well as some of the smaller and bigger blocks of wormhole space about what's going on, why it's happening, and our opinions about it, come check us out. That should be about 2300 UTC tonight, which is in about 3.5 hours.
Fantastic. We will check that out.
That does sound like an exciting watch.
Yeah. One last thing. We do have mining people that represent TIS. We have 2 or 3. They don't always make the Sunday show, but they help inform us on some of the things that are happening and stuff. But we'll highlight more of that stuff in the future as well. We want to get into economy and trade a lot heavier than we've been doing so far. And I don't just mean Caleb. I'm talking about like people who are in there trading and doing the financial part of even the hauling and that kind of stuff. Like that whole area of the game is so rich. All right, guys. Thanks very much. Arcia, Elise, Hateless, Tiberius, our guest, Mikal, and of course, McLeod, our engineer. Thanks for helping us out and put the show on. That's all we have time for today. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations, the Weekend Report. Take care.